Never waste a good crisis. And when it comes to the economic crisis, don't waste it when it can have a very positive impact.
You never want a serious crisis to go to waste.
The way we're going to win over the long term is not just militarily. We've got to win over hearts and minds. And what that means is we've got to invest in countries that have no educational infrastructure, have no means for young people to get ahead. We've got to give them a stake in creating the kind of world order that I think all of us would like to see.
Stay tuned for Politics and Religion.
Well, on today's Jerusalem Post, under Rosner's domain, a new idea was floated. It actually is labeled New Idea of the Day. Allow Israeli settlers to become Palestinian citizens. Now, to those of you that listen to this program regularly, you know we've already been talking about this idea for a while, so it's not a totally new idea. But here it is on one of the most widely distributed English Israeli papers in the world, the Jerusalem Post. All of us know about it. And they're actually carrying this serious article on what could indeed happen. I thought you should hear the proposal from the Israeli perspective. As part of a comprehensive agreement between Israel and Palestine, all people currently residing within the borders of the Palestinian state will be given the option of becoming Palestinian citizens. This means that the original owners of the land where the settlements stand would be compensated at the going property rates for the land that was taken from them. Those Palestinians who sold their land would, of course, not be compensated in any way. So if the land was taken in process of war and now Israelis are living there and it actually was owned by Palestinians at the time, they would be paid by either who? The international community, by Israel, by someone at the going property rates. Now, many of them sold their land to Jews of their own voluntary will, and so they would not in any way be up for compensation. Palestinian citizens would have the same rights and responsibilities regardless of race or religion. So theoretically, Jews would have the same rights and responsibilities as the Palestinians would. Those who choose to leave the newly independent Palestine and have legitimate claims to property within its boundaries shall be duly and fairly compensated for their loss. So the Jews who say, no, I don't want to live as a Palestinian citizen, I'm moving, then they would be remunerated for the value of their property. Palestinians from pre-1948 Palestine who have legitimate property claims shall also receive equitable treatment and compensation. Now, the reason I'm talking about this story today is because the Bible prophesies about this very situation 2,000 years ago. In Matthew chapter 24, the Bible's most famous prophecy chapter, Jesus himself gave this chapter. Jesus said in verse number 15, when you see a certain thing called the abomination of desolation, then let those which be in Judea flee. Well, Judea is the territory that would become the new Palestinian state, the territory where Jews, some of them, will apparently be living at the time of, well, it's actually 3.5 years before the Battle of Armageddon. But to read in today's Jerusalem Post a proposal setting up the very scenario. The Bible says that those people who live in Judea, and it's particularly the Jewish people living in Judea, 3.5 years before Armageddon, when this incident occurs called the abomination of desolation, that those people will have to run for their lives because then it would be great tribulation such as never has been before, nor ever again will be. So what's it actually telling us? It's telling us that if they put together this kind of a scenario where Jews will actually be living under Palestinian authority, any Jewish person foolish enough to believe that that's a safe situation will end up being the object of slaughter out here in these territories. And we have seen past brutality. We have seen what can happen when the Muslim mobs go angry. It's not a pretty sight. Jesus described it as a time of great tribulation, such as never has been before, nor ever again shall be. But what they're proposing in today's Jerusalem Post is the very concept that's going to set things up for the teaching of Jesus Christ himself. He said in verse 16, let those of you which be in Judea flee. And then he went on to explain, because, and he also said, let those of you that are in the field not come back to grab your clothes. If you're on the rooftop, don't even come down to get your billfold. Hit the ground running. When you see this particular sign, and the sign is going to be when the Antichrist stands on the Temple Mount claiming to be Messiah and God. He said, when you see that event, then you better hit the ground running, because then will be great tribulation, such as never has been before, no, nor ever shall be. Are Israel and the United States preparing for war? News reports coming in from around the world believe it is true. Why is Israel setting up an air base in Saudi Arabia, right on the Iranian border? Why did the U.S. move 11 warships into the Red Sea within the last week? We'll talk about the prophetic implications today on Politics and Religion.
Look, there are two things I don't discuss: politics and religion.
In my house, we don't talk about politics and we don't talk about religion.
I'll talk to you about anything except politics and religion.
I never talk about politics and religion.
Politics determines how we'll live here on earth. Religion determines how we'll live forever. I'm Irvin Baxter. I think it's time we talk about it.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'll have to confess to you that when I woke up this morning and began to go over the news of the day, I really wondered if some of the people writing today's news were listening to Politics and Religion here yesterday, because as you know, if you were listening yesterday, we talked about all of the developments that seem to be pointing toward war in the Middle East. I awoke to this story today from Israel Today, which is a news source out of the nation of Israel. And the title was, Israel, U.S. Preparing for War with Iran. Now see if you recognize what they're saying from our program yesterday. A flurry of news reports over the past week indicate